Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Wanted to give you an opportunity to find out what's going on in terms of the Israel Security Act. It's called, the bill is actually called the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act. It's expected that this bill will come up this week. And because of so much focus on Israel, I wanted to kind of tell you how this bill differs from what Joe Biden had presented and has asked for, because it is a significant difference. And it's a difference that is the difference between Americans for Limited Government being able to support the bill that the House Speaker has come up with and is pushing forward versus being actually opposed to the Biden appropriation. First of all, the Speaker is splitting off any mention of anything other than immediate Israel concern, military materiel concerns. We're not talking about, he's not putting in any humanitarian aid to go through the UN. Doesn't have it tied to the Ukraine. He doesn't have it tied to the border. I think the border fight's going to come up. It's just not going to come up on this particular bill. It'll come up in the Ukraine bill, it's my bet. And he's not having it tied to some other defense needs in the Pacific. All of which are part of the Biden massive $105 billion appropriation bill. So the bill that the Speaker has come up with, and I've got it up here on my phone, that he's come up with, is $14.5 billion or $14.3 billion in emergency. It's an emergency supplemental appropriations package. It is offset. What that means is, to pay for it, money's going to be taken away from the IRS, from the massive appropriation that the Democrats gave the IRS and increasing enforcement. Money's going to be shifted and say, we're not spending the money over there. That's not a priority. We're spending the money here. And so it shifts money. One of the critical differences that people have to understand and I need to get. We've been spending a lot of money on these supplementals, but we haven't been paying for them. It's just additional money above and beyond what the regular appropriation is. This Speaker, in his first real bill that he's driving through on his own accord, his priority is, we're going to do what we need to do, but we're not going to spend new money on it. We're going to follow what the Budget Control Act says. We're going to follow the rules. We're going to follow the agreements that we made on the debt ceiling deal. And we're going to take money that was previously allocated elsewhere, and we're going to move it. We're going to move it to meet this priority. And that way, when you do that, you force people to actually prioritize things. Everything isn't a specific need, or not everything is equal. You have to actually prioritize, and that's what we send our people to Congress to do, is to prioritize the spending, not just say, oh well, let's buy everything. It'd be nice to be able to go to the grocery, go to a nice store and buy every single thing on every single shelf, but which is what we've been doing. Well, this is prioritizing, and it's important. It's something that this Speaker Mike Johnson, is putting into effect. And I think people need to appreciate that. Let's talk about what's in it, because yes, you're right. It is a lot of wampum. Y2K 4ED. Yes, it is a lot of wampum. And our dollar is soon to be worth about the same as wampum. I'm just going to give you some of the costs. Ensures American military readiness, providing $4.4 billion to replenish domestic defense stockpiles. We have been we're going to be sending a lot of our stockpiles overseas, because the military, essentially the military spending, Israel's arms are compatible with ours. And so as an immediate stream to provide immediate boost, that's happening. It's also happening in Ukraine, obviously. But that's a domestic stockpile. That's a direct national security concern. And it's a wise way to make certain that we are not just supplying the munitions needed, but we're also resupplying our stockpiles, so we're not left naked and unable to defend our interests, because we've basically been giving away our military stockpiles to everybody else in the world. So that's $4.4 billion. it gives another $4 billion to replenish Iron Dome, David's Sling, and David's Sling missile defense systems. Iron Dome is what you always see. You have all those missiles being blown up in the sky. That's Iron Dome. It is it's good in dealing with, and as is David's Sling, dealing with kind of lower end missile systems that they face in the Middle East. And so that's it provides a missile defense that is quite honestly one that we should be buying for ourselves, one that we should be developing, not, should just a purchase from the Israelis, because truth be told, this is a defense system that deals with drones. It's a defense system that deals with kind of the lower end rocketry, and it's a different system than, for instance, the Patriot missile system, which deals with more, higher end rockets that go maybe a little bit higher. And so there's a need in some of our outposts, some of our positions that we have in Iraq and Syria, for instance, where we don't have the capacity to detect and destroy things like, drones. They're weaponized drones that are flying over our fences, and we don't see them. We don't have a system in place to actually interdict them. And so aside from giving everybody Striker 12 shotguns, which have a barrel and can shoot 100 shotgun shells in a fully automatic system to knock down a drone attack, which quite honestly they ought to do. It's very inexpensive. They're about $3,000 a gun. All of our forward-facing bases in the Middle East ought to have that capability, because quite honestly, our missile systems aren't set up to deal with a swarm of drones, of attack drones, and we don't have a way to deal with it. If nothing else, having a system, a Gatling gun kind of shotgun shell where you're basically shooting them out of the sky like they're birds flying in, would be a highly effective way of dealing with them. So anyway, that's a different story. That's not in this appropriations bill. That's just me rambling about guns that back in when I worked at NRA, it was all the rage to try to ban. So you got 3.5, and so you got $4 billion to replenish the Iron Dome and David's Sling. You got 3.5 in foreign military financing for procurement of advanced weapon systems and defense. So essentially, this is so they can continue. Israel can continue to build the advanced weapon systems that they're going to need to face the challenges from an Iraq or Iran rather that has highly sophisticated weapons systems that they're going to try to employ against Israel. You've got another 1.2 for another missile defense system. It's dealing with short range threats. That's your drones and the like. $1 billion to support artillery and munitions production. So essentially, let's build this. That's about building the munitions, being able to create enough, expand our capacity, our munitions creation capacity to meet the needs of the world that we have right now. And that capacity has been diminished, and the objective here is to bolster that capacity so that we can, in fact, not have to fight a multi-front war, but to support our allies who do have to fight those multi-front wars. And if they're using our weapon systems, we have to be able to supply those weapon systems with munitions, and this is part of that. And then enhanced security presence at the U.S. Embassy, money for evacuation of U.S. personnel, security personnel, or personnel and citizens from the area. And it requires accountability. It requires accountability as it relates to having the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State provide regular reports to Congress about what's going on and how the security assistance is being done. this differs. What's happened in the past is you've had this problem where they give the money, but then there's no accountability. There's no, here's how it's being spent. Here's the progress of what's going on. Here's what we're doing. It just goes into a black hole. And so they, until they come back and say, gee, we need more money. And, rather than going in that cycle again, the House is going to demand that they actually are accountable. The interesting part about this politically is that you're going to end up having a battle between the House and the Senate. The Senate's going to want to pass the $105 billion mass appropriations bill. The House is passing a very narrow appropriations bill. Let's be clear, $14.3 billion is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And you're going to get a lot of material out of that. And we're going to resupply Israel's capacity to defend itself through the various missile interdiction systems that they have, and to help them develop additional ones that would be that obviously would be valuable, that we could get ourselves, so we can use their systems downstream. So there's some really important aspects to this that meet the immediate needs of the Netanyahu government. The Senate is going to pass, is likely, and hopefully there'll be some Republican senators who stand up and say no, and we can force a real fight in the Senate side. But the Senate's going to try to pass a massive appropriations bill, $105 billion. The money won't be offset. Joe Biden hasn't provided any offsets for $105 billion. $105 billion is a massive amount of money to offset. That is a massive amount of money to offset. When we have these fights over whether or not you're going to defund, the government's going to fail and all this stuff, we're talking about 1.9 trillion dollars. And so when you're talking about let's say $1.8 trillion, if you have 100 billion, that's 1/18 of your total budget. So you'd have to cut 1/18 of your total budget in authorized spending in order to offset 105 billion. This is, these guys have forgotten in a lot of ways that, this is real money. This is a lot of money, and the Biden administration essentially loads on a bunch of other things that they don't want to actually have a discussion on. And under the guise of, if you don't vote for those, you're not voting for Israel. The fight in the Senate is going to be very simple. There's going to be a direct Israeli aid package that the House has passed. The question will be, will the Senate pass that aid package, or will they try to tack on everything else to it? We know that that the Senate would prefer to tack everything else onto it. And then if the Senate passes the $105 billion package, the House has passed a $14.3 billion package with an offset, they're going to go to conference, and the House is going to have to stand up and say, no, challenge the Senate. Where's the offset for this? Where's the offset for this? Where's the offset for this? And what's more, if you go in and you have the Senate passing tens of billions of dollars for the border, that doesn't secure the border at all, but instead just provides additional personnel to process illegal aliens coming across the border, and to house illegal aliens around the country, and to transport them there, and to give states and localities and local nonprofit organizations monies to take care of the illegal aliens. If the Senate decides to pass that, we're going to have a totally different fight about border security. And we're going to have that fight because I think if we can get the Senate to focus on the Israel package as a standalone, and then we'll have a fight over Ukraine, the border, and the Pacific, some submarines in the Pacific. We can have, the House has already set the stage to do a single shot Israel. We can talk about everything else later. And that will create an environment where we have a real discussion about what's happening in Ukraine. We're having a real discussion about what's happening at the border, what should be done about it. We'll have a real discussion about whether or not the submarine appropriation that's part of this should be in the defense appropriation budget and not as a separate standalone. And if it's in the defense appropriation budget, what $15 billion expenditure can they do without? Since it's not, we're not, I don't think the House want to do something that's additive. They're going to want to say we're willing to put this much money into defense. That's what we agreed on in the debt ceiling deal. That's what we agreed on. So much money for defense. So if you're getting 800 billion, 820, whatever it is, and you want $15 billion more to go to submarines, tell us what the $15 billion you're not going to spend. We'll authorize the shifting of the money. That's the battle we're going to have. Those are the kind of discussions that need to be had. That is called being an adult and figuring out how to make it so you make do with a massive budget. And that's what's happening in the House. And so so we're going to have it's going to be a very interesting week. With this bill will probably come up Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday or Friday in the House. We're going to have a major fight over it. And I wanted you to be prepared so you know what the House is doing and the actions they've taken to try to narrow the scope of the immediate emergency bill dealing with Israel. On Ukraine, there is a different problem. I'm going to just tell you from reports, Ukraine is not winning this war. They had a major summer offensive that they'd hoped to make major inroads to try to take back Crimea, or at least cut off the land bridge to Crimea. And they didn't succeed. They got bogged down and they did not succeed. That's just unfortunately a reality. The Ukrainian economy is in shambles as a result of the war, which has destroyed a lot of their agriculture industry, and the agriculture industry that they have is dumping wheat into Poland, making the Polish farmers upset because it's lower the price of wheat in Poland, and so now they have Poland on their borders, and they're saying kind of in a fight with the Zelensky government in Ukraine, not a shooting fight, but a war of words, because Poland has elections too, and so you have this dispute. Ukraine is so they have an economic problem, and that the economy is bad and people are suffering. That's true. They have a problem that a lot of their infrastructure is not functioning because it's gotten blown up, and we're going into winter again. And unlike last winter, which was relatively mild in Ukraine, it's if they get a harsh winter, it becomes problematic. It becomes a real problem. And by the way, one of the things about winter in Ukraine is it actually is advantageous for armored vehicles moving forward because the ground freezes and you don't have a lot of mud. Whereas in the spring and the fall, you have a lot of mud and you end up with difficulty moving around heavy machinery. So as the ground freezes, unlike what you would expect, is actually an opportunity to engage in mechanized offensives, which puts Ukraine at risk. So there is urgency in terms of the Ukraine appropriations. The question is, should there, given how much money has been put in and no accountability whatsoever, I think there's a real question about what needs to be done and what should be done. And just taking Joe Biden's word for it no longer is acceptable. And so that's that's on Ukraine. And I will tell you, I'm not advocating for this, but I think where it'll end up going is, I think there are enough votes to pass a Ukraine package. What I'm hoping is that if there is a Ukraine package, so this isn't what we're advocating, this is what I anticipate is going to happen, that there are enough votes to pass the Ukraine package, and that you'll have but there'll be accountability put into that package, so it's not just throwing good money after bad. It's my hope that some accountability will be put in place in terms of forcing a decision at the Pentagon on offsetting the spending, as opposed to just adding to the current spending levels. I'm hopeful that that will occur. The Ukraine part of the package is about $64 billion, fully over four times the Israel package, and a lot of that spending is to try to keep the economy of Ukraine upright, and in terms of paying for pensions for the government workers, paying for pensions for farmers and others who are having their livelihoods destroyed by the war. And so those are all within that package. Those are all should be discussed. Those will all, and the question becomes, and quite honestly, Joe Biden needs to be asked, well, how would you pay for this? How are you going to pay for it? Because ultimately, at some point, and I think Speaker Mike Johnson makes this point quite directly with the Israel package, we're not just going to write checks here. We're going to be responsible and try to balance them against the other, against other costs, and what's a lower priority thing, and take the money from the lower priority things and put them in the higher priority things. And once that starts occurring, I strongly suspect that these one-size-fits-all massive emergency appropriations bills that become Christmas trees with a lot of other things on them suddenly won't have nearly as many things on them, because if they were priorities, many of these things would have ended up in the regular appropriations process. So things that don't make it into the regular appropriations process, they try to slam into an emergency appropriations bill and get it done, because people don't want to vote against Israel, or don't want to vote against the hurricanes, storm relief, or that kind of stuff. And so they spend a lot of money under the guise of those kind of emergency spending, but they spend it on other things that didn't meet muster when you were looking at what was really going on. So that's what we're doing. That's what's happening on it. I'm going to get some comments here, and then we're going to get out. I don't want to take too much of your time on this. I don't understand why Israel needs money. I hope this money will be tracked and paid back in the future. Surely there's a sensible. If it's free money, then no. Yeah, AW. Is it free money? None of it is in the form of loans. So I guess you could say it's free money. The challenge here is Israel has, well, first of all, the munition stocks that we've had in Israel for them to use in the event of this kind of attack were sent to Ukraine. So we have a almost contractual agreement that we're going to replenish those munition stocks. Israel needs them now. They're an ally, and they're facing people with seeming unending money, and who are seeking to overrun them and kill and end the state of Israel. And as an ally, we're supporting them. So this isn't a loan. This is providing munitions, providing them with the capabilities to defend themselves. Joe Biden somewhat unadroitly tried to sell it as a stimulus package because we're going to be selling a lot of weapons, but it really isn't that. This is a responsibility we have, is when we have treaty alliances to defend the treaty alliance. Not putting boots on the ground. Not a big fan of putting boots on the ground. I am a big fan of making it so Israel has the capacity to defend themselves, and that's what this does. Is it provides them a capacity to defend themselves from foreign attack. Let's see here. Priceless Davies. We should not be funding other countries' wars. It's an interesting question, because when somebody's attacking a country like Israel, which is an ally, a country that stood with us on 9/11, and somebody's attacking their right to exist as an ally, we have a responsibility, a treaty-based responsibility to help defend them. So the fact is, if Israel was the aggressor and was trying to attack Jordan, say, and try to, or if they were going to go try to take over Lebanon, that's a different story. But Israel, I think we have a moral responsibility to support our friends in the world, and there aren't that many of them, support our friends in the world when they come under attack by those who would attack us. Those who, when they're attacking Israel, use our names in the same exact sentence. So, I just disagree with you. I understand the position. And we have been pretty directly concerned about kind of the endless wars that have been going on, and we've been very vocal about that. I believe that when an ally gets attacked, like Israel or Taiwan, we have a moral responsibility to stand with those who stand with us. So that's the position that we have. Today, when Congress says new spending is paid for with cuts, what do they mean? Is they're replacing spending or projects? No, actually, Priceless, you're wrong on this. They're spending, this is monies that have been allocated and appropriated for IRS are being transferred from the IRS to fund this what I outlined on the Israel spending. So they are actually physically taking money off of the ledger for the IRS and putting it on the ledger for the Defense Department or whoever's implementing this, Think Defense. And so that is a direct transfer. It's transfer money. So you have no additional monies that are spent. So this isn't a shell game in any way, shape, or form. It is an actual offset in the costs. So the net of the cost of this appropriation is zero. 61 billion to Ukraine and 14 to Israel. It should be another way around, as Israel's our ally. Both give an account of how their money is spent. In reality, it should go to Ukraine. Now, Kat, I'm very skeptical about the Ukraine spending, as you are. The fact of the matter is, it's my hope that what we're doing, the allocations for Israel will end up being a one-time allocation. It is my hope that we will be smart enough, and our Defense Department has chosen not to do this so far, and as a result, we don't have an effective weapon system for knocking down drones that are attacking and other low-flying objects, shall we say, that are attacking in swarms. We don't have that capacity right now. And our troops are left vulnerable as a result of that. We have had a lot of casualties by Iranian-based attacks using essentially low-tech weapons that our high-tech weapons aren't very good at detecting. So, yeah, my hope is that part of this will be being able to get the technology of what Israel's already developed, buy it, and then implement it into our systems to defend our forward-facing bases against these same kind of terror attacks. So that's my hope of what will happen out of it. But I don't think that's a deal that's been made by this particular administration, as the Department of Army has been insistent on trying to develop their own system, and they haven't gotten very far along on it from what's been reported. So, we may have our own system for dealing with drones in 10 years, and Israel has one now. So perhaps it would be wise. I think it would be wise for us to go to Israel and say, let us buy the technology to develop this so we have the similar system that we can put in place for our forward-facing bases in places where they're particularly vulnerable, in the Middle East in particular. Let's see here. Well said, Locke. Stop the occupation, stop using our tax dollars on women, children, babies who have no place to go and no way to defend themselves. Okay, interesting comment. Hamas is the government of Gaza. Just be clear. Hamas is the government of Gaza. Hamas puts rocket launchers and fuel dumps and all the infrastructure, ammunition dumps in civilian areas, under schools. They put them in by hospitals. They deliberately use the people of Gaza as human shields. Hamas is blocking the passage of people who want to leave Gaza City to go south. It's a relatively small area. Gaza's about the size of New Jersey. It's to go south to where there's less action from a military perspective. And Gaza and Hamas is blocking the civilian population from moving away from harm. Why? Because Hamas wants civilian casualties. That's what they want. You know, when you're sitting there, I'm going to go to the big story. It's still, nobody's actually covered the truth on this. Remember the hospital that supposedly got bombed and was actually hit by a Hamas rocket? Then turned out it was the hospital parking lot that was hit. And oh, by the way, the hospital's still standing, wasn't blown up in a ball of fire. Well, guess what? 500 people didn't die in that hospital. None did, if any. There might have been a few, but the fact of the matter is, if you were in the parking lot, you didn't fare well. But if you're in the hospital, it was by and large, if you're in surgery and all of a sudden all the ground shakes, it might not have gone well for you. But by and large, you didn't have 500 people lose their lives in that hospital from a Hamas rocket that went awry. It just didn't happen. So the reports we get of civilian casualties are all being reported by Hamas. And they're being reported in a way, and we cannot depend upon a single one of those reports as being accurate. Hamas could solve this problem. Return the hostages. You want to solve 50% of the problem? Return the hostages. But they haven't. They're dribbling them out because they're trying to get PR goodwill out of it. The fact is they got 200 hostages that they've taken. Return the hostages. The people of Gaza can say, we no longer want Hamas as our government, and remove Hamas as the governing agent of Gaza. That's something that they could do. It might not be pleasant. Those are the kind of things that can be done. But for me, I will not sit there and say that Israel shouldn't be able to defend itself from a military attack which was aimed at civilian targets. Not aimed at military targets, aimed at civilian targets. I, for one, am not going to say, gee, everything's equal. Hamas goes in and cuts the heads off of babies and basically creates the worst Halloween nightmare you could ever have. And we're going to sit there and call it equal? No. Israel has a right to defend themselves. And only Israel can determine when the threat has been sufficiently diminished or eliminated so that they can rest assured. I want to remind people that Israel had started had programs where they were bringing people across from Gaza into Israel to work, making salaries that were as much as 15 times the salaries people would get in Gaza. They had a whole system set up to help do that. They were looking at Gaza as being an area where they didn't have problems, and they were opening it up. They were concerned about the West Bank. They were concerned about Palestinian Authority, which has been much more vocally militant. They're concerned about the northern border with Hezbollah, which has been vocally militant. but they'd kind of taken their eye off the ball with Hamas because they'd been relatively quiet and open to some things that created more open borders. I also mentioned the fact that none of the Arab states, and I'll include Egypt in that, even though they're not technically Arab, who border or have historical ties to the people who live in Gaza, not a single one of those states wants the people from Gaza there. Why? Because they're all tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. You might remember Egypt, which is where the southern border of Gaza is, had their own problem with the Muslim Brotherhood. And the military came in and wiped out the Muslim Brotherhood government. Israel, Egypt doesn't want more Muslim Brotherhood fighters coming into Egypt. Jordan doesn't want more Muslim Brotherhood fighters coming into Jordan, because those are threats to the existing hierarchies, the governments of those countries. So part of the problem in terms of putting people as refugees out of Gaza is none of the neighbors that have actual historic ties to the people want those people in their country. So, that's a challenge. So what do you do? Well, Israel's saying, let them move south, and we're going to focus on cleaning out the tunnels on our northern border, on their northern border. We're going to try to clean out the mess, clean out the rat's nest. And Hamas itself will not allow people to leave. They're blocking them. They're essentially blockading their own citizens from being able to flee a military attack. That's on Hamas. And then you look at the country of Qatar, where a lot of Hamas's leadership is happily residing, collecting money as the governors of Gaza, but they don't live in Gaza. They live in 5-star hotels in Doha. That's the challenge. So there is, until the people of Gaza choose a civilian leadership that is not at war with Israel, there is a problem, and Israel has every right to defend themselves in any way they deem necessary. And any kind of pretend world where people say, gee whiz, there should be a ceasefire because can't we all just get along? Just look at some of the pictures of what was done to the people of Israel. We're living peacefully, who are attending a peace festival, and were attacked in a military assault. So look at that and say, if you lived in Israel, what would you expect your government to do to protect you from future attack? If you can't get that, then I don't know what anybody will get, but that's where we are. Let's see here. Lisa, you're right. Hamas is running Gaza. The Iran, both the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and Hezbollah to the north, who've basically destroyed Lebanon, are all Iranian proxies. Additionally, there's Iranian proxies that Joe Biden decided weren't a problem in Yemen, who have been firing missiles at Israel from Yemen, which is it's at the southern part of the Red Sea. And so Yemen is at the southern part of the Red Sea, and they've been firing missiles up from Yemen that go over the Red Sea, come from the southern tip of Gaza and into Israel, is how those missiles would fly. U.S. destroyers in the Red Sea have taken out a significant number of missiles that have been fired at Israel from the Houthis in Yemen, who one of the first acts of the Biden administration was to take the Houthis off of the terrorist watch list that President Donald Trump had put them on. Virtually everything the Biden administration has done in the Middle East has created an environment where it's extremely more dangerous. and the Iranians have massive amounts of money to spend because they don't care about their own people. They have massive amounts of money to spend on terrorism around the region, around the world, and that's a direct result of Joe Biden's policies, and and he can't run away from it. It's one of the reasons why the world's a more dangerous place, because the so-called experts are now in charge. And I'm going to leave it at that. I appreciate everything that you guys being here and having this discussion. I know, if you thought this was interesting, please feel free to share it, and follow Americans for Limited Government on whatever channels you happen to follow, Facebook, YouTube, Truth Social, Twitter, X, Rumble. We're on all of them, and we just appreciate all you do. Take care. Hope you found this to be informative and helpful.